Yo, what is up, guys? It's Dom here. I spent all day trying to concoct this video for you guys. I'm just gonna kind of do it raw. It's gonna be one take. This video is going to be concerning all of the strengths and weaknesses of all the teams and groups now that we have all 4 groups determined here after play-ins. I wrote down the strengths and weaknesses of every single team. From my perspective, how I believe these teams are going to be interacting on the main stage. And it's really just kind of things that stuck with me as I've live viewed games from every single one of these teams, except for Machi, which I VOD reviewed their finals and semifinals for. Yeah, helping me here. I'm not going to keep this on screen because I probably have a bunch of things horribly misspelled here. But yeah, I ended up taking some notes. So here's like every single team's strengths and weaknesses is what I've been pretty much going through. I double checked with VODs, tried to make sure that I was as accurate as possible with a lot of this stuff. And I'm just going to pretty much give you my perspective on these teams going into Worlds. Yeah, like we just have all the teams listed out here. So I'll be referring to this throughout the video, but I won't be keeping these on screen. Also, you have my pick'ems here. This will be revealed on FaceCheck, which I haven't shot yet. It is currently 5 a.m. PST, October 1st. So yeah, it's pretty early in the morning. Hopefully we don't stumble over too many words. Hopefully we, don't have any types of, misinformation or any misspeaking in the video. But we'll do our best to try to make sure that we get all the information out there. So we're going to start with Group A, and we're just going to go down every single group. So yeah, the first team that we're going to be talking about in Group A is G2 Esports, which is the 1 seed from Europe. This team is the team that I'm expecting to come out first. I put a lot of value in this team's ability to perform on stage when it matters. They've proven time and time again that when the pressure's on, they're one of the best teams in the world, and that is something that we haven't got to see that much of in the regular season because they played most of the games online in LEC. But yeah, I believe that this team is actually really strong coming in. I expect the top 4 finish. I would be really surprised if they didn't make it into semis. Obviously, there are some really bad draws you could get. When you look at Group B, you have DAMWON, Gen.G. One of those teams is going to be the 2nd seed. So no matter if you're 1st or 2nd in Group A, you could potentially play either of those teams, which would be a very rough quarterfinal matchup. But yeah, for G2, we'll jump straight into it. Caps is definitely the biggest strength on this team right now. This guy was insane. If you watched LEC, this guy was building Soul Stealer every single game. He was taking over games alone, and he makes very few mistakes compared to how he used to be. I know there was kind of a meme before with like caps and craps. There was claps and craps. There was 2 different types of players you're going to get. You would never just get caps. You get either the guy that's taking over games, or he was just going to shit the bed and hit the whole game alone. Not like that anymore. This guy is really consistent. He's a hard 1v9 player. He's one of the best mid laners at this tournament. I expect really good performance from him. I think that he is the biggest key to them making it out of this group in 1st place. Alongside Caps, you have Wunder. Wunder's super reliable. He's always good when it matters. This guy is grinding solo queue right now. When you look at how the team plays, they play heavily through the picks of their solo lane. Their bot lane is relatively inconsistent, which would bring us into their weaknesses. They have a lot of 2v2 deaths. Mickey X and Perks have not been playing well. I expect a lot of this to change at Worlds. Perks has been one of the best players at Worlds for years now. I remember last year coming into Worlds, no one expected him to be one of the absolute best ADs of the tournament. But for the majority of the tournament, and even through the entirety of the tournament, I would say that he was the best AD carry at Worlds last year. Another one of their weaknesses that I see when I look at this team is Yanko's champion pool. Now, I definitely think that he's been, a veteran player that's been able to play a lot of the different picks in the jungle right now. But when we saw them play against Fnatic in playoffs, he looked very comfortable on set and not so comfortable on some of the other picks. Like his Lee Sin really wasn't hitting the mark anymore. His Hecarim was all right, but like the big question for me is he going to be able to pick up a lot of these meta junglers that we're going to see at Worlds? One pick that China is really big on, and Korea is really big on for that matter, that we haven't been seeing that much in the West, specifically in Europe, is Nidalee. So I want to see if they're able to proficiently play the Nidalee. If they are able to play like Nidalee Lucian or Nidalee and set mid, another 80 mid to complement that, I feel like this team can be really strong, but we'll have to see how they adapt to the meta. One other thing that I want to list into the strengths, I guess we're kind of jumping around here, but going back to the strengths, one last thing I want to talk about is their ability to flex things and play Mage's bot. We've seen Unicorns of Love start pulling out Mage's bot, but one of the picks that I expect G2 to actually flex is Nico. I saw Perks playing it a little bit in solo queue. I know Wonder likes playing the pick a lot. I feel like that could be a really valuable pick that could give them an edge. I know that they played a lot of picks like Syndra before in the past, and they were able to flex that mid bot, and it gave them an advantage in general. So I definitely think that that could be a big point for them to just really spice things up in the draft phase and get teams a little bit uneasy in that particular phase of the game. When we go to the next team, it will be our number 2 team that I have here, which is Suning. So I think Suning is really underrated right now compared to, how good they actually are. I think a lot of this is because of how bad LGD played. People see LGD and they kind of associate it with, well, Suning and LGD were supposed to be in the same tier, like they're the 3rd, 4th seeds from China. They might not end up being that good, but I think that that's kind of false compared to how well they played in the regular season, even leading into playoffs. Somebody brought up a stat where, like, out of the last 12 best of threes they played, best of 5s, best of 3s, best of series that they played, they pretty much only lost to Top Esports in the regular season, and in playoffs they obviously lost to Top, and then they beat LGD 3-0. So they're an extremely good team. They have a bunch of really young talents. Bin is super strong. He is their top laner. He actually just turned 18. He was 17 up until about 3 days ago, so happy birthday, Bin. But this guy has the most solo kills out of any player in LPL. He's an extremely dominant player. That being said, he is super young, so you don't know how he's going to perform on a stage like that. But at his best, he could be one of the best top laners in the tournament. SOFM, Yankos' counter, the Vietnamese jungler, Yankos versus Vietnamese junglers, you got all the memes right there. But just in terms of SOFM and the way that he plays, I feel like he's just a really hard jungler to ever be ahead of. He's super efficient. He almost never goes for bad plays, and he's really smart about knowing how to get himself ahead in every single game. The only criticism I really have of him is just his itemization. This guy loves Warmogs. He goes Warmogs 3rd almost every single game on every champion. I'm obviously a hater of the item, but this guy really makes it work. So you got to give credit to this guy. He's been extremely good, and he's been kind of like the star of this team, or probably the most known player on this team besides from maybe Sword Art. You have Huan Feng, who's been insane as well. I think that he has a really good ability to pick up a lot of these new picks, so I expect his Twitch to actually be extremely scary coming into Worlds. I've talked to a lot of teams that have actually been scrimming Suning, and a lot of people think that this team could potentially even get to top 4, top 2. Apparently these guys are scrim gods, so that this team has the talent. The only reason I have them in second is because I feel like they have a higher chance to choke than a team like G2. I even feel like they could, have an LGD-esque performance and not even make it through the group stage. Maybe Team Liquid just ends up, being better than them. So that's pretty much mainly their strengths. They're super fast-paced. They're a typical Chinese team in that regard. They try to hard snowball games. They enjoy lots of fights. All that good stuff that you expect from the LPL. Weaknesses, they're new to the big stage. The only player that's played at Worlds before, I believe, on this team is Sword Art. And Sword Art obviously played with Flash Wolves. And I personally believe Sword Art to be a big weakness of this team. He kind of reminds me of a Chinese version of Hilly, where he dies a lot to try to make plays, but he has a lot of the same issues that Hilly has, which is the propensity to get caught while solo warding. He tries to start off a lot of fights where his team might not be ready. He might be desynced with his team. Try to engage too quickly and just give up a lot of free deaths. So I think that's something you definitely have to look out for. And then also just the fact that they have so many young players. I guess I'll state it again here. Huan Feng, Bin, Angel, etc. SOFM first time on the world stage here. And I believe SOFM is only 22 himself, so he's not a super old player by any means. But yeah, the fact that they have so many young players, I feel like they could end up choking on the main stage. So I really hope that we get to see the best Suning, because I feel like that would make for the best tournament. As far as how this team interacts with other teams, I think versus G2, they should have the highest chance of beating G2, because G2, generally speaking, has been kind of weak early game. They're prone to getting snowballed on. Normally, in the games that they end up losing, the other team just gets too far ahead, and G2's the team that kind of bleeds out kills every now and then. And, a team like Suning will really be able to make that lead or like really explode that lead. But into TL, I feel like they could potentially have a mismatch if they don't end up winning hard early. I feel like TL is the type of team that would just like outscale this team in terms of just decision making, not just based on like the champions they pick, but just in terms of how the team plays and like when they're comfortable. So yeah, if they don't play at their highest level, I could definitely see things going bad for them. But I do have them as my second seed in Group A. All right, Team Liquid. So strengths for this team: they're an extremely consistent team. They have a strong team identity. Almost every single game, you have a strong laning bruiser top, a Mordekaiser, like a tank pick, maybe a bruiser tank like Shen, Ornn. Yeah, it's like this is just what they like to play top. I expect that Impact will probably be able to play Sion and other tanks that are available right now, or like that are prevalent right now. If there's a good Malphite game, I'm sure Impact could play it well. And yeah, they play a lot of strong laning champs, mid and bot lane. I guess the exception there would be like the Twitch Rakan lane, which isn't the strongest in lane, but it's good in team fights. And, you know, TL seemed to pull that off really well in play-ins. They're a veteran team, so I believe they'll perform at a pretty consistent skill level. There's not a high degree of difference in skill. So like, let's say Suning has the chance of playing at a 5 out of 10, to potentially like an 8 or a 9 out of 10. Feels like Team Liquid is always going to be playing at a 6 out of 10. You know, they're never going to be playing super insane, but they're never going to be completely shit either. They're very consistent in that regard, and that's what I've been talking about when I've just been, you know, regarding them as a consistent team. They have a slow early game, admittedly, but they have good plans and mistake-free late games for the most part. So normally if they get a lead, they don't end up throwing it. They have good setups, all the things that you'd expect of a veteran team when it comes to controlling a Baron, making the right decision on when to start the Baron, how to play side lanes, things like that. That is what makes this team a threat, is if they get to the mid and late game and they're on even footing, they'll probably end up winning those games. As far as weaknesses go, I feel like their champion pools are extremely rigid. Obviously, I got to mention Broxa here. His Graves, Lee Sin have been his 2 best champs, but we've already seen in plans how, you know, how his Lily has looked. I don't know if he has the ability to play Nidalee, which I assume is going to be pretty high priority. I know he plays in solo queue, but in terms of can their team actually pull it off, I'm not sure. And I think a lot of this also goes down to AD mids, right? AD mids are super important with AP junglers right now in the meta. I don't feel like Lucian, which is one of the strongest picks right now in mid and top, as an AD threat, really fits with this team. So I don't know if they're going to be able to pull out like, you know, Lilia Lucian, Eve Lucian, all these comps that we see other teams pull out proficiently. I don't know if this is actually something that Team Liquid could do well. So we'll have to see if they actually have that big of a champ pool. I think they have an exploitable top lane draft. We saw this from INTZ, where they kind of forced Impact onto Renekton. Team looked way worse when Impact was on something like Renekton that actually needs to trade more, needs to fight more, than when he's on something like Ornn, Shen, Mordekaiser. So I feel like teams are going to be able to prep for this. So maybe you do something where you ban Shen and then you pick Camille, which is decent into Ornn and Mordekaiser. And I feel like if the top lane champion pool is targeted and then maybe Graves is picked away from them, Graves has a good matchup into Lee Sin, I could definitely think that a team could just exploit Team Liquid in draft. I think that's why INTZ ended up beating them, is because they were they had the best approach to drafting against TL out of all the teams in Group A of play-ins. Yeah, another weakness, definitely their slow early game means that they're prone to getting snowballed on, and that's really dangerous versus teams like G2 and Suning. Even though G2 does not have the fastest early game, they have players that are really pop-off players that makes it really hard to play the game if they end up getting ahead. Wonder, Caps, obviously Caps, if he just gets Syndra or something and he just dominates mid lane, builds a Soul Stealer early, it could be rough for TL. So yeah, I feel like they actually have a hard time versus G2 in terms of matchup, just because G2 is kind of like a TL but better, like a little bit more aggressive. I think their players actually are just better laners everywhere except for bot. Yeah, and I think Jankos is just a better jungler than Broxah, so I feel like they match up better in the top 3 positions. Bot lane could be a coin flip, but I actually feel, like I said earlier, the TL would have a decent chance versus Suning, because if Suning doesn't end up, you know, really snowballing like they normally do, then I think TL will be able to take games off them. So that's pretty much my perception of Team Liquid in this group. I have them coming in third, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't potentially get out. The way that I kind of view things is like percentage chance to get out. So let's just throw some numbers around here. Let's say that I think that Team Liquid, TSM, and FlyQuest all have a 35% chance of getting out of groups, right? If that's my logic and my statistics are correct, that technically means that there's like a 73% chance that I have a NA team getting out of group stage. Now, I'm not sure which team from NA will get out, or what team is most likely to get out. I think it's TSM based on strengths of groups and things like that, but it's really hard to say. My prediction would be that one team does end up getting out and they end up losing quarterfinals. That's what I'm expecting from NA here. All right, so next team we have here is Machi. Now, Machi is the team that I've watched the least of, so I don't have the best opinions on them. From what I've seen, they kind of seem like a worse version of Team Liquid from 2018, 2019. So if you remember the same way that TL used to dominate NA, it wasn't like they were just smashing teams the same way like C9 was smashing teams in spring of 2020. TL was much more controlled, and they had like a good formula on how to win games, and they would just normally win because they had better players. But it wasn't necessarily like they were smashing other teams in the early games super hard. In their finals in PCS, they're actually losing some of the early games, but they would just end up making better decisions throughout the game and winning. They seem to have a pretty rigid style where they play like a lot of tank tops, things like Volibear, etc. Orianna mid is a huge pick for this team. And they were just better coordinated from my perspective than other teams within the PCS region. But I don't know if this is actually going to work here. Like I said, I haven't watched too much of them, so maybe I could be wrong on my opinion, but I would expect them to be fourth in the group. I think TL, Suiting, and G2 are actually coming in at a pretty decent level. Maybe they'll end up matching up versus TL because TL plays that same type of style, and maybe they could just do it better. But I think that this team will actually do really poorly versus Suiting and G2. Okay, so that's Group A. Okay, Group B. So we're starting with DAMWON. I actually have Gen.G above them. I switched this later. I have faith in Gen.G, which I'll get into. But let's just start with DAMWON. This is the team that I wrote the notes on first. So we'll just keep it in order here. All right, so the strengths of DAMWON, they are one of the top 3 teams in the tournament coming into Worlds due to their insanely strong top side. So their mid, top, and jungler are all world class. All players that you'd put probably in the top 3 in their positions in the entire world. Maybe top 4 in their positions in the entire world. They play extremely well through Nuguri. Canyon has a distinct style where DAMWON does not normally like highly prioritize dragon. Obviously, if they can get free dragons, they take it. But from what I observed, the way that they perceive the game is that the best way to snowball is getting Herald at 8 minutes. Like if you have strong top side, you have pressure top and mid, you just have your jungler solo Herald, dive top, take the turret, and just have that 2k gold lead and eventually end up snowballing off that. Maybe you give up the first dragon, maybe you give up the first 2 dragons, but you end up contesting on third with your massive gold lead that you've accrued from snowballing your top laner. I think Showmaker, obviously one of the best mid laners in the world, as I referenced earlier. He's extremely versatile. He's pretty much the complete package for mid lane. He can play Sylas, he can play Akali, he can play all the picks that you would need, as well as like mages on a top tier level. So I think that their strength really lies in topside. But obviously, when your top side is really strong and you're pressuring it mainly throughout the games, it leaves you with a weakness, which is bot lane for DAMWON. So DAMWON bot lane, to me, seems like the most exploitable part. Ghost specifically is somebody who I don't think really does that much in terms of like pushing advantages. I think he's consistent. I think he's solid, which is definitely good enough to win Worlds. Like this is the team that I have as a potential Worlds winner. One of the 3 teams I think is like poised to win Worlds. But I think that because he is more of like the utility player, and maybe not pure utility, it's not like he's playing Ashe every single game. He's played a lot of Ezreal as well. But he's just not going to be the star of the show. So I think that could be potentially exploitable. When I go into Gen.G Gaming, Gen.G, one of the reasons why I think that Gen.G is actually going to do better than DAMWON in this group is the fact that their bot lane is simply better. Like I'll take Ghost and Ghost and Beryl I think are fine. There's obviously specific picks that Beryl plays that are really good. I mean, this guy is the inventor of Pantheon support, etc. But when it comes down to like pure laning, I would take Loken compared with Lamau, obviously, over Beryl and Ghost. That's just my perspective of things. I just think that they're simply better laners. Loken and Lamau. So that's a weakness. Their bot lane, I think, is a big weakness here. I think Nuguri at sometimes can be a little bit overly flippy. I mean, there's this whole meme in LCK where this guy has the 0-2 power spike, right? He just dies 2 times in lane and then he comes back into the lane after being 0-2 and he just snowballs through the game. That type of shit scares me, man. Personally, when I see that, I stop thinking, hey, man, like, oh, it's just funny. This guy's dying all the time. I'm like, hey, this guy has some inconsistent laning, and that could eventually be exploited if he matches up against somebody that's as good as him. And I think Zoom is extremely good. I think Zoom is one of the best top laners in the world. If you say Zoom is the best top laner in the world, can't really argue with you that much there. So I think that this could be exploited within this group. And yeah, one thing that I noted as well is I feel like Beryl specifically looks weaker when Pantheon is banned, for sure. So when people take away his Pantheon, I feel like that lane becomes just not that much of a threat. All right, JDG, Gen.G Gaming. Okay, similar to DAMWON, they play a top side focused style. So this is where I think it's a really interesting matchup. JDG versus DAMWON, both of them have like junglers that play around top laners. So it's going to be like, are both teams going to match the pressure? Are we just going to get constant 2v2s top? Are we going to have 3v3s with the mid laners joining in? Are we going to have supports roaming up there? What exactly is going to happen when these two teams meet? It's pretty hard for me to say. One thing I will say, though, is I feel like Zoom is the more consistent overall top laner, which is pretty much the opposite of the point that I said before, or just the counterpoint to what I said before, where, you know, Nuggery is a really flippy player. I think Zoom is more consistent overall. I think when Kanavi's playing well, he's a more dominant jungler than Canyon. I think Canyon's extremely good, but Kanavi really knows how to take over games like to that next level where he's purely 1v9ing. I think part of that is the way that the team plays around him. Kanavi and Lamau specifically have the best support jungle synergy in the world, and from what I've seen, the way that these guys, like if you watch replays, the way these guys time their bases, the way they duo invade, the way they drop wards together, the way they set up dragons like as a unit, I feel like that is so practiced and that is so strong coming into a world championship, because these are the types of things that a lot of these players can fall back on. Even if you're not playing super well, if you're not super ahead, if you have these good pillars of gameplay where you've practiced a million times, like, hey, I don't have a lead, you don't have a lead, but we know to base at the same time, we group, we get wards, it opens up a lot more opportunities to get kills throughout the game, and it gives you better setups around objectives, which I feel like is really crucial in a lot of these close games. So it's one of the things that I respect the most about JDG. For weaknesses, I think that they are overly dependent on Kanavi. They're used to Kanavi just being super far ahead and just snowballing games alone. So yeah, I think that that's something that could be a flaw of theirs, a fatal flaw. When we watched TES versus JDG, this was the main reason I thought that TS ended up winning that championship. I thought JDG had a lot of really good plays throughout the tournament, but individually, I feel like Kanavi kind of choked in that final, and that was one of the reasons why JDG was not able to match up and win their second title. These guys obviously won in spring and lost in summer. Mid lane, I think, could be a weakness. I think Yagao is really good on a few specific picks, mainly LeBlanc, Zoe, Echo. I think he's really strong on those picks, but if you push him off that, I think that Showmaker is just the better mid laner. Let's say they go Control Mage versus Control Mage or something like that. It's like an Orianna matchup versus Syndra. I'll take Showmaker in that every single time. I think his Lucian is passable. I don't think he's a super good Lucian. He's one of those like super center Lucians where he goes for the Blade of the Ruined King almost every single game. He's not really big on the Mana Moon Essence Reaver build, at least from what we saw in playoffs. And they really just use the Lucian pick to bridge the Eve, Nidalee, Lilia into the games. Like they get that power strong early mid laner, and they allow Kanavi to play his AB carries and take over the game. So yeah, that is definitely the weaknesses of this team. Also, they are a very defined team where they, like I said, they play top lane almost every single game, which means that Lamau and Loken are normally left to their own devices. So that's what I have for JDG. Okay, Rogue. So Rogue has a really great jungler in Inspired, right? He's somebody that I've championed a lot. I said that in the regular season, I thought he was the best jungler in all of LEC. However, I think he's outclassed in this group, unfortunately. I feel like this is one of the worst group draws that Rogue could have got. That being said, Inspired leads the team well. He can play a variety of carry junglers. We've seen him on Graves. We saw him on Eve. We saw him on Hecarim in the playoffs. And he picked these champions up quickly. You know, in the first series they played versus Fnatic, he was on Sejuani. Didn't feel like he played the carries. In 1 week, he was able to transition to Graves, Eve, Hecarim, which makes me think that he'll probably be able to adapt to whatever meta the tournament ends up bringing. If they end up having Nidalee in these games, like a lot of Nidalee in these games, I feel like he'd be able to play it. So I think that that's definitely a point of strength. Yeah, I think Han Sama is specifically mechanically impressive. This guy doesn't seem to make very many mistakes at all. I know that Hansama and Vander ended up getting 2v2 outlaned by Reckless and Hillsong in a couple of their series, but overall, I feel like, this guy is a rock for the team. He's very consistent. Last player I want to mention here in terms of like points of strength is Larson. Larson is one of the best control mage players in the tournament. From what we've seen in LEC, just his ability to find farm on the map, the way that he gets ahead when he's playing Orianna, Azir, these types of champions, is second to none. This guy knows how to find farm. He knows how to get really strong throughout the game, and he can 1v9 a team fight if you give him the items. We'll have to see if this play is actually replicable against the top teams. To be determined. I'm of the opinion that it's probably not. Just off seeing them versus G2, it seems like Caps really got the best of him, and I feel like Showmaker, Chovy, these are the same types of players that will be able to exploit him throughout the tournament. Obviously, in this group, he's not going to have to play against Chovy. He will have to play against Showmaker, Yagao, solid mid laners. I feel like both of them are going to be able to do their own thing. The weaknesses. So the weakest part of this team in playoffs was Finn, and there's no doubt about that. You ask anyone about Rogue, their top lane is their weak side. And for me, the biggest issue here is that if you have a weak side top laner, right? And by weak side, I mean just like he's generally the worst part of this team. And you're playing into a player like Zoom, a player like Nuggery, and they have Kanavi and Canyon camping their lane, getting Herald, dropping it, diving you, like all this shit. I feel like that's gotta fucking bust at some point. Like that's just gonna explode. So I really feel like this is a really rough matchup for that reason. I can't see a world where Finn is, going even with Zoom or Zoom or Nuggery. I mean, there are some picks that could be really good. Maybe Ornn is just super OP. It looked really OP in play-ins. Maybe Ornn will just be picked every single game. Rogue will somehow get it, and he'll be a rock in the top lane. But I would be really surprised if they weren't able to abuse Finn. So that's the biggest weakness for Rogue. I think that Finn also has, he's been completely unable to play carry champs. So like, because he's been unable to play carry champs, you're not going to have hard drafts into them, right? Like, they're not going to pick Camille. He has picked GP before, but it never looked good. I don't know if he'll continue to pick it. But yeah, I just think that this will be a rough situation here. And like I said before, Larson might be able to match up fine into Yagao on certain picks, but I'm scared of watching him play versus Showmaker. I feel like Showmaker is just going to be Caps version 2 versus him. Showmaker could easily play some assassins and look for kills in lane and just completely nullify him, which we've seen before. All right, going on to the last team in this group, I have PSG Talon. So PSG Talon, their biggest strength right now, I actually think, is the biggest strength right now, I feel, is the fact that they're completely unknown. Obviously, there are some things that are, known about the team. It's not completely unknown, but they haven't really played with their mid and jungler. And I think as of making this video, they are going to be playing with their official mid and jungler. So most teams might not be able to prep for them that well. You don't really know what these guys have been playing. You don't know what type of practice they've had. You don't know if this team's ever like scrimmed in the last couple days with these guys, and they've completely different styles to what their subs played, which kind of leads me into the weaknesses. So outside of Kaiwing, I thought that the best two players on PSG in play-ins were Kongyu and Uniboy, which were their two subs from AHQ. And from watching Tank, I just don't think that he's as good. I think their new jungler, I watched all of his games. I think his name is Rivera. I'm not super impressed with him either. I feel like they're just more standard, where at least Kongyu had that ability to pull out the niche picks. I mean, when he pulled out the Echo, they got a win off of it. And yeah, I feel like their main lineup will actually be worse than their two sub lineup. So yeah, I'm a little bit worried for how this team will perform. In PCS versus Machi, they seemed to be pretty good early game. Like, they could get leads, but they would make more poor decisions as the match went on, and they ended up kind of throwing their leads, and that's why they ended up losing, getting second place. I think for solid teams like Top or JDG, or even like obviously DAMWON in this group, I'm just talking about like just teams in general. When you're playing against that top echelon of teams, I think that even if you do get some leads early game, they're not going to be huge ones because the players are so good. And it's really hard to beat these teams if you even mess up one time. So maybe this team could get third in the group if Rogue really chokes, but I just don't see them doing that well. I think this group is the most decided in terms of like the top 2 teams getting out. All right, Group C. So this is the group that everyone's talking about. This is the group where all the magic is supposed to happen. I'll just preface this group by saying, you know, if the difference between a JDG and a PSG is like PSG is about a 4 on the scale, maybe a 5 on the scale, JDG and DAMWON are like 9s or 10s, right? So there's a big gap between the top team and the bottom team of that group. Top teams and the bottom teams of that group. When you look at Gen.G compared to LGD, who I have at the bottom, maybe LGD comes in at like a 4 or 5, and Gen.G is like a 6 or 7. So all these teams are super, super, super fucking close in terms of their skill, which has obviously been stated before. I have Gen.G actually making it out of this group in first. And the reason why I think that they'll be so good is mainly because of their bot lane. I think their bot lane is by far the best in the group. And Life and Ruler are a really special bot lane. I feel like they don't play like anyone else. And that's really hard when you go into a tournament like this. They play a bunch of really strange lane combos that people don't really think of here in North America or even in EU. So they play things like Graga support, a lot of set. They pair this with kill lanes such as Kalista, and they play to just kill you over and over again in that 2v2, which I think is really scary for a lot of these Worlds teams. I think Ruler is mechanically the cleanest AD that I've observed. In all the live viewing that I did, I thought that just in terms of pure mechanics, raw mechanics, I thought that this guy was the best AD carry in the world. And I think that BDD matches up pretty well into every single mid in this group. I don't think Nemesis will be a problem for BDD, and I think that the fact that he can actually play some of Bjergsen's picks could be a problem for TSM, such as Zilean. We've seen BDD pull out the Zilean. He has slightly a different build than Bjergsen, but he can play it, right? So if, you know, they decide to go into a draft versus TSM where they decide to leave Zilean up, let's say they're on purple side, which is normally like the side that can third pick the Zilean, I think they can pull it out pretty easily and take it away from Bjergsen. I think their weaknesses here for Gen.G is I feel like their top and jungle are really hit or miss. They're relatively slow in the early game in terms of how their jungle interacts with lanes. I think once they have leads, they're pretty good at closing out, but their like early game is pretty slow. But once they start getting going, they're smart about the game. They know how to close out games, and that comes with a lot of veteran players, right? Yeah, lanes don't have the best synergy with their junglers, which can allow them to get run over by teams. And I think that Clid specifically just looks a lot different than he did last year. When you saw him play last year, he was like the best ganking jungler in the world, right? Like his Graga, Sizzly, Sin were on a level above everyone else. He was, you know, somebody who at the end of the tournament, if you said he was the best jungler in the world, or like right after Tien, you know, second best jungler in the world, it would be understandable because of how clean the guy played. He doesn't look like that anymore. He looks more just like a consistent jungler that's, you know, trying to just do his part, trying not to lose the game. Doesn't really try to do anything to fuck up the game, like either, or really snowball it. He just exists, and he's generally doing okay things at the right time. I've seen a bunch of questionable plays from Clid, so that's kind of why I have them as a 7. Like, I don't think this team is super strong by any means. And yeah, I feel like he's just kind of lost on this team, and that could be an issue for them. Yeah, and that's pretty much what I have for Gen.G. The next team I have in this group is Fnatic. So Fnatic is a super flip team. When on form, they have a strong top and bot lane that generally can kill you early on in the lane phase, and they play with a super carry jungler. Selfmade is somebody who's normally a good driving force in this team. Their top and jungle have massive champion pools. Selfmade can play everything. He can play like this guy used to be an Italy one trick, but he can play the assassins. He can play Eve. He can play Kha'Zix. He can play Hecarim. We've seen him do it. We've seen him even pull out tanks. Like he can play the set. Like this guy is super, super versatile. And I think that's really scary when going into one of these games. I could definitely see him being the best jungler in this group by far. If that happens, I wouldn't be surprised at all. And yeah, I feel like just drafting against Fnatic is kind of difficult because of all the things they play. You have to make a lot of decisions. Hey, are we going to leave up Eve for Selfmade? Are we going to leave up Lucian for Nemesis? He looks really good on it. Are you going to try to ban Nemesis out? Are you going to ban the Lucian and Orianna? If you do, then like is he able to bring something else to the table? I know in finals he kind of deferred to the Corki, which I didn't really like too much from him. But I assume that that's something that he's trying to work on, and I believe that they'll come into this tournament with a couple more picks. Reckless has been super consistent. He's been one of the best AD carries in Europe as always. He'll pretty much never be behind, and Hilly, when Hilly's on, is one of the best supports in lane phase. Like, this guy can just get a bunch of fucking kills. And we saw in playoffs, right? Playoffs Hilly was a completely different beast. So playoffs Hilly, Worlds Hilly, I feel like that's going to be a good strength for Fnatic. Weaknesses. So one of the things that I said about draft, which could be a strength, which is the fact that Nemesis is really good on Orianna and Lucian, may draw bans. That could be a weakness as well if Nemesis hasn't been able to learn more champs to add to the pool. Like, if he doesn't have a good enough champion pool to pull out some of the other things that we've been seeing. I know in plans we saw a lot of set mid, for example. If we can learn the set mid, that could be a huge advantage for Fnatic. But we haven't seen it yet, so that's a potential weakness. Hilly obviously can be randomly desynced with his team. He's prone to being caught out a lot while solo warding. Sometimes he starts fights on weird timings where his team isn't ready to follow up and he just dies and just ends up feeding a lot throughout the game. You also have the 2v2, which is what I call it within Fnatic. So you have Blippo and Hilly versus Nemesis and Reckless. So Blippo and Hilly are, the people that always want to fight. You get into a situation, you listen to Fnatic's voice comms, they see enemy champions, Blippo and Hilly are like, can we fight this? Yeah, we can go in. Like, I've got this ability. Like, let's go. And then on the other side of that, you have Nemesis and Reckless, who are normally calling things off. Like, hey, no, like, don't fight. Like, we can just set up vision, just play consistently, play slow, like, get the dragon. They have a different mentality than the rest of the team. So sometimes this can be good because they balance each other out if they're all like in sync together. But other times you just end up with two different ideas where you have Blippo and Hilly wanting to go forward in the fight and Nemesis and Reckless with a much more passive approach to the fight. So I think that this could be one of the places where Fnatic completely crumbles. They don't seem like a team that has a very strong team identity in terms of like how they all like to play. Yeah, next team we have in the group, everyone's favorite, TSM. So I think that TSM has a few strengths. I actually think they have a decent amount of strengths. They have decent champion pools for the meta, and they're pretty hard to draft against. They most likely will draw Nidalee and Zilean bans in most of their blue side games, with the exception of the Gen.G game. I don't think many people want to take the test against Bjergsen's Zilean. Nidalee is something that Spica plays super well. It's a really good pick at the tournament. And the fact that TSM is able to play Lucian, they're able to play it top lane at least. We haven't seen it mid yet, but we assume that they can probably flex it. We've seen Bjergsen play it in solo queue. They can also play other mid laners. We've seen them play set mid, which would open up the Nidalee. They can play AD Nidalee. They can play AD mid laners, which opens up the AP junglers. So yeah, big strength there. They have a wide range of top lane counter picks that they can play into. So this is another reason why it's really hard to draft against them. They have strong picks that you want to normally ban out, and then also you have to be really careful about what you pick because it seems like BB has a counter for everything. If you're one of these teams that wants to early pick Renekton all the time, I wouldn't be surprised if BB just pulls out the Quinn and just dominates a game. If you like playing Ornn, he seems really comfortable in the Camille into Ornn matchup. If you play a ranged top laner, BB is going to pull out their Aurelia. He is going to dick you. So yeah, there's a bunch of different counter picks there. You pretty much are forced to save your top lane pick until later in the draft. Or else this guy will have a counter pick for you. Another one, if you are on the idea of just early picking a Camille, something like that, this guy plays Jax. So I think BB is a big threat in terms of draft specifically. Like, this guy is really good about developing leads on his own. Bjergsen, obviously, great form at the moment. He's drawing a Zilean ban in almost every single game in NA, and he's pretty great on the other control mages. His Orianna, Syndra, TF, all extremely good right now. So that's going to be the rock for TSM. I mean, I completely expect Bjergsen to play well. The big question mark is going to be on the rest of his teammates. Rakan. Now, this is a pick that NA was playing before anyone else. I don't think it was actually that good in playoffs because of the meta, where there was a lot of lane bullies being played bot lane. Caitlyn was stronger on that patch. Ashe was stronger on that patch. But those champions actually ended up getting nerfed, even though they were slight nerfs. Those are the types of things that dictate bot lane meta. It's part of the reason why you see other weaker ADs, which have now been buffed, Vayne, Twitch, etc., popping up in some of these games. And I think the fact that TSM plays a lot of Rakan, they're comfortable on the pick, could be good for them on this tournament. I think it was really good timing for the meta to switch. Maybe it's just TSM Riot. They had to give TSM the little boost. Obviously a joke, but yeah, I think that the meta really aligns with what they were doing in NA, so I think that's super good. Weaknesses. Their bot lane has a relatively weak early lane phase. These guys normally don't kill that much, besides for the best of 5 into TL, where they did actually get a lot of lane kills. That was really good. For the rest of the series, I never felt like their bot lane was a huge point of pressure. Partly that was because of their picks. When you play things like Rakan, you're not going to have super good lane phase. But it just seemed like TSM was never able to figure out some key champions in the meta. One of them being Caitlyn. For some reason, whenever TSM picked Caitlyn, it never felt like they were actually like pushing in, getting plates on the turret. It seemed like they were just, even in lane with Caitlyn, which is something that you never want. And even by the end of playoffs, it felt like they didn't even really like playing Caitlyn. They would leave Caitlyn up, play Ashe into Caitlyn, or just pick Ashe blind. They didn't really seem like a Caitlyn team. So I'm a little bit worried about that. It seemed like they just prioritized Ashe Senna above it. I think that could be an issue at Worlds if Caitlyn ends up being strong. I know in playing stage, a lot of people didn't pick it. We saw it pick some games, and in the games that we saw, like the Caitlyn Morgana game that we saw from Supermassive, for example, it seems like it still can be really, really strong if you pick it in the right spot. I think that this would be a great counter lane to Twitch Rakan if people are continuing to pull that out blind. Spica also has had consistency issues in the past. I think he played really well in finals, but in terms of like the overall amount of games that we've seen, he's had up and down games. He's looked really good on Set in Italy, but if those champions are taken away, or if Set's not a good pick, let's say some guy early picks Graves, Set is not always the best pick there. We'll have to see, if he ends up choking on the big stage. Generally, this team, historically, in any teams throughout the history of Worlds, have been slow to adapt to Worlds meta. So I actually expect TSM to come out strong in the first week, but I would, if history repeats itself, they will most likely be weaker in the second week. So I could see them beating Fnatic in the first week and, potentially losing in the second week to Fnatic once Fnatic's really got their shit together. Last thing I want to say here is just the lanes that they're playing against could be really, really scary bot lane. Life and Ruler, like I said, really, really good at finding kill lanes, things like that. They love playing these random picks, and I feel like Doublelift has never been super good about dealing with really strange picks in the bot lane. It seems like anytime somebody pulls out something that he hasn't seen before, he just kind of gets stomped on. So I could be a little bit worried about that. And then also for Hilly and Reckless, I feel like Hilly just plays like no other support, and he has like a bunch of random picks that I don't know if TSM will be practiced against, primarily Hilly's Pike. Rakan is going to be in the meta, so for that matchup, maybe Hilly is playing a lot of Rakan. That was historically one of Hilly's best champions. Bard, his Thresh was exceptionally good and ended up being banned away a lot in playoffs. So when Hilly's on, I feel like he's really, really scary in the first few levels of lane. So yeah, these are the weaknesses that I see for TSM. Definitely could see them getting out of the group, but there are some issues that could be exploited. So I'd say that they're probably the highest chance of making it out of groups for NA, but I still have Fnatic making it out over them more times than not. Last team in the group is LGD. So this is one of the only placings that I changed. I remember before before play-ins happened, I had a talk show where I talked about LGD, and I expected them to come in a lot hotter. I actually had them coming in third in this group and TSM fourth. I thought they would be pretty good just because of the level that Peanut was playing at. And yeah, went on form. They have the best jungle and support movement in the early game out of any team in this group. Like these guys can really like two-man take over the entire game. I saw Mark getting better throughout the playing stage, but didn't see the same for Peanut. I think Peanut was having a rough go of it. We saw it a ton in the LPL. We saw a lot of the games where they were able to really react well to what the enemy team did with support roams and things like that. My issue with them is that throughout playing stage, when the other team isn't making as many plays on them, when they're not super active like the other junglers or the other teams are in LPL, it feels like they're not as good. LGD is not as good. Mark and Peanut are not as good at finding their own opening. So I kind of changed my mindset a little bit where I was like, oh, these guys take over the game together, support jungle, into like they're really good at reacting to when the enemy team tries to make plays on them. That's kind of how I see them now. I think Jie is a monster and can snowball the map on a variety of picks. He has the largest champ pool out of these mid laners in the group. Like Kassadin, Silas, TF, Orianna, Syndra, everything. Like this guy is a really solid pick, or really solid player. But I'm a little bit worried for how the team is going to come together. All laners are, relatively strong. They can build their own advantages, but their synergy seems a little bit off. So for weaknesses, like I said before, Peanut looked straight up bad in the playing stage. Wasn't able to get the leads that we expected him to get. I was somebody who had him rated really highly based on how he played in LPL, but he didn't look at all the same. Seemed like he was really nervous. He wasn't able to pull off the early ganks that we normally see from him. There was maybe like one gank that looked like a Peanut gank to me, which was the Kindred blue side into level 3 gank mid in one of the best of 5s. I thought that was good, but besides for it, wasn't the highest on Peanut. I think they also play a bunch of these center comps, so to speak, that require a high level of execution, which they just didn't seem to have. So what I mean by that is they're playing things like Lee Sin, Camille, TF, where they're not going to have great team fighting innately. They play Camille, Cassidon, where they're not going to have good team fighting. And they really lack, they're not a good team fighting team to begin with, but then they really lack the picks to have good team fighting in a lot of their games. So I feel like their drafts don't really suit them, or they're just not good enough to pull out the drafts that they've been playing. I expect this team to go like 1-5 in groups, by the way. I think they have tons of poor setups around objectives and bad decision making on how to approach objective fights, and they don't really have good execution on the plans that they make. So at the beginning, when a Drake spawns, you like to see certain teams show off their mindset. We're about to go into Top Esports. I'm going to make a point on Top Esports that's going to relate a lot to this, things that I've observed that to me make them seem like a really strong team. It seems like LGD doesn't really know how to approach objectives. Like their setups are a little bit late. And then you'll just see them be disjointed, right? You'll see Longxing going around the back trying to flank, and before he's even in position to flank, somebody else will go in, or he'll go in super early before his team's ready to follow up and die instantly. And it just looks like they don't really know how to play around objectives well. Their dragons, their heralds, they looked way worse in play-ins than they did in LPL. So I don't have very high expectations for this team. I was already pretty low on them coming into play-ins, but after play-ins, coming into groups, I'm even lower. I think they'll most likely get last in this group. Okay, last and final group. Group D. Top Esports, number 1, their strengths. I think they have the highest average laning skill out of any team in the tournament. That means that when you average out like how good each player is, if you gave them a score out of 10, all of their players are like 9s or 10s, besides for Yu and Gia, which is like maybe an 8, They're all really, really, really insane to me. And they have really high amounts of versatility in how they play. So when you look at a team like DAMWON, when you look at a team like Gen.G, right? They're a topside focused team. You can look at them and going into the game, hey, they're going to pick, like even from their draft, it's like Nidalee Renekton, that type of shit, where they're going to play around topside. Or you see Zoom on like Camille, and then you have an Eve for Kanavi, and it just signals, hey, we want to like get these guys ahead. We're going to like play together. We're going to gank the lane. And it's really hard to play against if you execute it properly. I think Top Esports' biggest strength is that they can play with anyone being a carry. If you pick any exploitable pick anywhere on the map, this team is really good about punishing it. If you pick a Mordekaiser top, we've seen 369 pull out the Jax and just like 20-minute Blade of the Rune King Triforce dumpster these motherfuckers. So I really like that ability throughout a team. They all trust in each other and they're willing to have anyone be the carry. Even Karsa, who before the finals, I kind of thought that this guy was the one person that could not carry on the team. They played a ton of Nidalee, they played a ton of Graves, and they played like a Nidalee or Graves team where they're focusing on getting their jungler ahead. They're allowing him to farm. They're allowing him to really do the things that he needed to do to make his pick effective. Yeah, I think Karsa is insanely smart. I think he's a really, really underrated jungler. He's good about identifying his own team's win conditions and playing around them. Just in terms of like which lanes are strong, like how to path around the lanes. He knows what timings he needs to hit for lanes to be good, and he does it frequently. One of the things that I really like about them, this goes back to the point earlier from LGD that I was going to bring up. They have really unique approaches to team fights that we don't see from that many other teams. One thing that I love that they do, for example, is they play a lot of like flank engagers with like 369. And when they set up for a dragon or they set up for a baron, instead of having the AD clear mid, which obviously an AD could outshove a top laner, they like to keep their flanker clearing the mid wave to give them permanent flank threat onto the team fight. So if they have a dragon, right, they'll have 4 people controlling the dragon vision, and they'll have their flanker, which will be like 369 on Wukong, for example, permanently clearing mid and sitting behind the enemy team so that the enemy team has to really be afraid of walking up, and it seems like that's just the best way to play these situations. Sure, if you put like 5 people mid and you push down mid, Wukong can't clear for shit. But they end up doing it at times where they force the enemy team to respond to the dragon, and they just get a bunch of good flank engages off of that. And I feel like that's just such a unique way to view the game, and I don't see other teams doing that based off what we saw before. Obviously, teams can improve. That's the reality. I mean, that's why we have to play the games here. Other teams can see them do it and be like, oh, that's smart as fuck, and adapt it to their own gameplay. But they were doing it first, and they seem like they were doing it the most consistently. For weaknesses, I don't think this team has very many weaknesses, but one of the weaknesses is sometimes when Karsa is playing specific junglers like Set or like Lee Sin, we saw him play a lot of Trundle throughout the split, he over-focuses on his lanes and ends up getting himself super, super behind. Surprisingly, he doesn't have this problem when he plays Nidalee or Graves. He doesn't play that style all the time. But overall, I think that this could be something that could be exploited if he does play super heavily around one of the lanes and, one of these other junglers has a really good game, say Torrent just pops the fuck off. Maybe he just won't be useful in one of these games. Also, all the lanes, push to their maximum limit when they're in these counter lanes or if they have good matchups, which can sometimes lead to them overextending and dying to TPs, dying to ganks. Jackie Love is the type of guy that he's like Forgiven Season 5, man, where he wants to push you into your turret and just shit on you under the turret and take the plates, take the turret in 10 minutes, swap, run the whole game like that. Like this guy is very, very confident in the way he plays. So, I just think that could be a weakness for them, over-forcing, giving away too much when they're trying to like push all these leads. Knight is the only player I think that doesn't really do that too much on this team. So that's my my rant about top esports. Next we have Dragon X. Their strengths, I mean, it's pretty much only one strength, but it's Chovy, dude. This team is all about Chovy. The good thing for them is Chovy is absolutely fucking insane. So I think that, they have a top 3 mid laner at the tournament. Chovy is almost never behind. He has some of the cleanest mechanics in the world. He has a wide champion pool with tons of counter picks, and they normally give him the opportunity to get these counter picks in games. If you see how they draft, a lot of the times they're willing to give him a later pick Echo, a later pick Sylas. Even the Relia I know is something he's famous for. If you pick a control mage, so for example, one of the laners he's going to play into in this group, Power of Evil, if you just pick Orianna, you got to be fucking scared of their Relia coming out, something like that. That's really going to shit on you. I would be surprised if they didn't end up playing like a Lilia or Relia game in this group stage to one of these teams that tries to go for the Orianna, right? So yeah, I think Chovy is a massive, massive strength for this team. Also, Deft, when he's on form, one of the best AD carries in the world. If he is on form for this tournament, could be really fucking scary. This team could be like a dark horse team because no one expects them to do that well. Weaknesses. So I think the rest of the team is relatively mediocre for a second seed Korean team. I'm not that big on Duran. I think Pioshik is okay, but he does have some really atrocious games randomly. There's some champion pool things that I like from him, like he's one of the biggest proponents of Kindred, and yeah, I think that's something really valuable because I believe the pick to be really strong in this tournament. So I think there are redeeming qualities, but he's not normally as dominant of a number 2 jungler as we'd see going into Worlds. If you compare him to a team that came in number 2 last year, right? Tarzan from Griffin, I would have considered a much better jungler coming into the tournament than Pioshik. Tarzan didn't do super well. At Worlds, but going into the tournament, he looked really strong. Pioshik doesn't look as strong as him for sure. One of the other things that I think is weak about them is just their drafting overall. They just have some weird fucking drafts from CV Max, and it reminds me a lot of if you're a North American fan, he reminds me a lot of Reaper, where I feel like he just tries to be too fucking 5-head sometimes, too crazy with the drafts, where if he just drafted in a more standard way, I feel like they would win a lot more games. So I feel like this could definitely be something that costs them games, just some really, really fucking awful drafts. And yeah, the other problem here is Deft and Carrier, right? So Deft and Carrier are both injured, or I believe at least Deft is injured. And he doesn't really look like himself in playoffs. He didn't really look super good. So we'll have to see what form he's in at Worlds. Strength, if he comes in good form, it's a strength. If he looks like he looked in playoffs, if he's still battling his injuries, could be a massive weakness. 2 teams left, boys. Okay. So UOL. So we saw a lot of UOL in planes. They're a really impressive team. I actually have them coming in 3rd in this group. And yeah, I think that they have some of the most unique drafts that we've seen. They have generally big champion pools, mid and AD especially. They have really good coordination between all of the team members. So you can tell when they commit to a fight, even if they're losing, they all have the same mindset. They know which fights they want to take. And it seems like they all are on the same page of like, hey, we want to fight this, like get ready to TP. Like they have all that communication down, which I think is really, really important when it comes to playing at Worlds. They're really in sync with each other. They make their plays together, and they're willing to play Mage's bot. They play a lot more Mage's bot than anyone else at Worlds. Orianna, flex pick for them. Swain bot, Ziggs bot, all that stuff. Really, really strong. They also play a bunch of AD carries mid, such as Vayne. I assume that they can play Lucian because, you know, if you're willing to pull out Vayne, it'd be really surprising if you didn't pull out Lucian as well. But yeah, I think Gadget and Santos look really, really good. They're just the beast of this team, in my opinion. They almost never lose bot. They play a ton of different styles, and Gadget's Twitch is absolutely fucking insane. So if he gets that pick, they get a Twitch recon, something like that. This guy can carry games. I think he's really good. Weaknesses for them are that they have weaker laners in mid and top. We even saw again in one of the games against LGD. I think their solo lanes each got killed 2 times or something like that. Maybe those 3 solo kills between the 2 solo lanes. But yeah, in terms of raw laning ability, even though I think No Man's is good, he's playing against Chovy and Knight. He will be outclassed mid lane in terms of skill, and I think this could be a big issue for them. They might not be able to get the fights that they really want because they could just be too far behind from pure laning. The other problem that I could see for them is that they're prone to throwing late game. We've seen it obviously versus PSG, but just even in a couple of the games they won, they look like they start being over aggressive. They fight too much late game once they have advantages where you don't really need to fight. You can just play the map and get the free win. Seems like they overcommit to a lot of fighting. If somebody gets caught, they're trying to TP in, they're trying to save the guy, and it leads to a lot of chain deaths, and the chain deaths is what lead to the enemy team that's behind maybe 5k gold getting Baron and potentially snowballing a game on you. So I feel like that is the biggest weakness for them. They're not really smart about cutting their losses when a situation looks bad. So, you know, this is the type of team where if things start going bad, they can go really bad. I mean, we saw it versus Rainbow Seven as well. You know, they want to commit everyone to a team fight, which means that some fights that should just be like 1 or 2 deaths could just be 5 deaths in like Baron. Yeah, and that's pretty much what I have for UOL. FlyQuest. So FlyQuest, solid team, very consistent jungle and mid players. They have a relatively stable level of play. Their style fits the meta pretty well. They play a lot of Recon. Pantheon is going to be pretty big at this tournament, I believe. You know, Ignar is super comfortable in the Pantheon jungle, so I expect that to be good. Control mages are still fine. Orianna is still a great pick, and Power Vivo obviously goes towards that a lot of the time. So I feel like they don't fit in terribly to the meta. I just feel like they're kind of like a boring team that I can't see doing super well versus any of the other teams that they play against. Maybe they'll just end up being solid. They'll have better mid and top laner than UOL, and they'll take games like that. But I would be really surprised to see Solo beating up Boss top lane after what we see from Boss in playing stage. I also just think that for myself, I could just be biased against FlyQuest. I think every single time that FlyQuest has been in a prediction before like a tournament, I've always rated them lower than they ended up getting. Like, I didn't think they would have got to finals in spring and summer. Like, I just didn't have them going to finals in spring and summer. So I think maybe I generally underrate this team. So take that as you will. I just wanted to throw that out there because, you know, maybe I'm just not the most fair to this team. A lot of time it's really hard for me to see how this team is going to match up versus teams that I perceive to be strong. But yeah, another strength I wanted to mention, Santorin. He's good at all the carry junglers right now. He plays the Lilia, he plays the Graves, he plays the Nidalee. Good at all of them. So definitely respect his ability to carry a game. But yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of weaknesses for the team. They are stable, right? And they do have a style that fits the meta, but I think that they're really easy to read and prepare for. They're pretty much going to be playing tank tops the entire time. I'd be really surprised if they pull out like Camille or like Lucian top, anything like that, and it's actually good. I feel like Solo is just not that type of player. He seems like he's most comfortable when he's on things like the set, when he's on, you know, Mordekaiser, Ornn, Shen. It seems like that's just his style. You know, he's Impact Junior, but worse than Impact. So I feel like he can be a liability. Also, with how these other teams play, it seems like he has generally bad gank awareness, and he's prone to being like 3-man dove, and he's the type of player that once he dies a couple times could really power into game. So yeah, I just feel like he's a huge liability. I think in lane, Turtle has a lot of issues. He doesn't normally build his own leads. Even when they play things like Lux Caitlyn, it doesn't feel like FlyQuest bot lane actually wins 2v2. So I feel like their best bet is actually just having Ignar roam and having Turtle just farm with something like Ezreal, play something like Caitlyn, etc. So yeah, I mean, I just don't think that they're a really good team. I just feel like they just are consistent and they kind of just outlast teams that are worse than them. But I just don't know if there's a worse team than them in this group. Yeah, they're prone to getting out bot lane in terms of CS, and they refuse to play a lot of strong lane combos. We don't see that many strong lane combos for them because when they pick them, like I said, they normally don't have, you know, huge leads. So FlyQuest is definitely the NA team that I'm the lowest on coming into groups. But like I said, I'm normally pretty low on them, so they might end up just surprising me. I mean, they've done better than my expectations in spring and summer of LCS. So we'll have to see how this goes. Anyways, that was the video. Ended up being over an hour of me just going through everything that I thought about groups. Hopefully it gave some perspective onto some of these teams for people that haven't watched all these teams play. Obviously, I watched all of playoffs, live viewed it with the boys. So, you know, I had some things that stuck with me through them, through all those games. Also, I just, you know, brushed up on things, tried to make sure that I was getting as much correct information out there as possible throughout this video. Anyways, I will be live viewing the entirety of Worlds on my channel. So if you want to watch the games, I will be starting with group stage on Saturday. And yeah, I'm just going to be watching the whole thing there. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope this was useful to you guys and you guys are hyped for Worlds because, you know, like I'm fucking hyped for this shit, dude. Like this is what I live for, man. This is what the whole year of live viewing, the whole year of co-streaming, all the podcasts, this is what it's this is what it's amounted to. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe to the Clips channel, which is where this will be. And yeah, I will see you guys later. Peace.